My name is Malik, and for most of my life I believed some stories were better left in the past. I thought that once something hurt you deeply, once it broke you at your core, the only way to survive was to move forward and never look back. But life doesn't work like that. Sometimes the past has a way of finding you, knocking on your door when you least expect it, dressed in a face you thought you'd never see again. That's what happened to me the day I received a letter from the man who put me up for adoption when I was just a newborn. He was my biological father, a man I had never met, never spoken to, never seen. And now he wanted something from me. Not a conversation. Not forgiveness. Not connection. He wanted half of the $3 million trust fund my adoptive parents left behind for me. Growing up, I always knew I was adopted. My adoptive parents never hid that from me. They told me with warmth, with love, with patience. They said I came into their lives the way blessings do, quietly, unexpectedly, but deeply. My adoptive mother, Grace, had the softest laugh and the kindest eyes. She used to tuck me in at night and tell me that family wasn't always about blood, but about who stands with you, who chooses you, who fights for you. My adoptive father, Samuel, was the calm type. A black African's man with wisdom in every word and a presence that made you feel safe without him having to say much. They raised me with love, not perfect love but real love. The kind that grows through time, through mistakes, through effort. I grew up knowing I wasn't abandoned. They always said, "Your first father must have had reasons." I believed that for a long time. I held on to the idea that one day maybe I'd meet him and we'd talk like people who were supposed to know each other. I used to imagine that moment would be emotional, maybe even beautiful. I used to imagine that he might say he wanted to know me, to see who I'd become. I imagined he would be proud. But that wasn't the story I ended up living. My adoptive parents passed away within 2 years of each other. Losing them felt like losing my entire foundation. But they left me with love, memories, and a trust fund they worked their entire lives to build. Money that didn't just represent wealth, it represented sacrifice. It represented late nights, early mornings, skipped vacations, promises they made to themselves that I would have opportunities they didn't. They didn't leave me money to make me rich. They left it to make sure I would never struggle, never be alone, never be left without a place to stand. So when the letter arrived from my biological father, I didn't know how to process it. The envelope was plain. The handwriting was messy, rushed. It didn't look like the type of letter someone writes after decades of absence. It looked like something scribbled in desperation. Inside there were only 3 sentences. I am your father. I know about the trust fund. I want half. No greeting. No name. No explanation. No emotion. Just a demand. At first I thought it had to be a mistake. Or a cruel joke. How would he know about the trust fund? Why now? Why after all this time, and why for money? But the more I sat with it, the more I realized the truth. He hadn't been waiting for me to grow up. He had been waiting for the money to exist. Waiting until I was old enough, stable enough, successful enough, valuable enough. The thought made something inside me crack a little. I tried to ignore it at first. I didn't respond. I folded the letter and put it away. But that didn't stop the feeling in my chest, the heavy, suffocating question of why. Days passed. Then a week. Then more letters came. This time with explanations. Not emotional apologies, but justification for why he believed he was owed something. He wrote about how hard his life had been, how many sacrifices he claimed he made, and how, if he hadn't chosen adoption, I wouldn't have had this life. As if his absence was a gift. As if leaving me was an act of generosity. As if he deserved to benefit from the life my adoptive parents built for me with love and sweat and quiet devotion. But what hurt more wasn't the request. It was realizing how wrong I had been about him. I had spent years hoping he might someday reach out because he cared. And now, knowing the truth, it felt like losing a parent all over again. Except this time the parent wasn't someone I knew. It was someone I had imagined. The situation became heavier once lawyers got involved. I never intended to go that far, but he did. He claimed I owed him. Claimed he had a right. Claimed that because he was the one who brought me into the world, he was entitled to the benefits of my life. I remember sitting in the lawyer's office, my hands folded tightly, my jaw clenched. The lawyer asked me softly, "Do you want to fight this?" And for the first time I felt the full weight of everything that had happened. Not just to me but to the people who raised me, who chose me, who loved me. This wasn't just about money. This was about identity. About belonging. About love that was real versus love that was convenient. And I wasn't sure what I would do yet. But I knew one thing. This man who called himself my father might share my blood, but he did not share my story. He didn't know who I had become. He didn't know the years of healing I had gone through. He didn't know the nights I cried missing the parents who loved me. He didn't know anything about me at all. Yet somehow, I knew this wasn't the end. The next chapter was coming. But I had no idea what it would reveal, or how much deeper the story would go. The days after that were heavier than I expected. It felt like my mind was constantly running even when my body wasn't moving. I kept thinking about my adoptive parents, about the home they gave me, about how much they worked to make sure I felt loved. I remembered the mornings when my mother would make breakfast, humming to herself while sunlight poured through the kitchen window. I remembered my father teaching me how to fix small things around the house, saying, "If you know how to take care of your home, you'll always have a place to stand." These memories weren't grand or dramatic. They were everyday moments. And those moments were what made me who I am. So the idea that someone who was never there could just step in and claim a part of that felt wrong in a way that went deeper than anger. I tried to talk to people in my life about it, but it was difficult to explain the situation in a way that didn't sound like just a money problem. My friend Cato was the first person I opened up to. He was someone who had known me since school, someone who understood the quiet things, not just what was said out loud. We sat on the steps outside my apartment complex in the evening, the sky dim and soft. I handed him the letter. He read it slowly, frowning the entire time. When he finished, he looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from him before, something like disbelief mixed with disappointment, but not at me. "That's cold," he said quietly. "Not even hello? Not even, 'I hope you're okay'? Just money?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak for a second. "And he didn't try to find you all these years?" "No," I answered. "Not once." Cato sighed, leaning back. "People think blood means something by itself. But it doesn't. It only means something when effort is there. When love is there." He paused. "Your parents were your parents. That man is just where life began." I knew he meant well. His words made sense. But even with that truth, part of me still wondered why I wasn't enough for my biological father to stay before. That was the part one didn't say out loud. As the legal situation moved forward, new things came to the surface. My biological father's name was Daniel. He lived only 2 hours away. He worked odd jobs, moving from city to city often. His life wasn't stable. His record showed financial struggles, debts, and failed business attempts. It became clearer that he saw the trust fund as a way out, a kind of rescue. The problem was that he was trying to take rescue from a life he had no part in building. My lawyer explained that legally, the case would depend on whether there was any documentation proving he had contributed to my upbringing or supported me in any way. There wasn't. Not a letter, not a call, not a dollar. But he was still pushing forward, making claims about what he believed he was owed as the father. It was strange hearing him referred to that way in legal terms. The word felt hollow. I started to wonder about the circumstances of my adoption. I knew pieces but not the whole story. The agency files had been simple. It said my birth parents were too young and financially unstable to raise a child. My adoptive parents told me that my birth parents wanted me to have a chance at a better life. And I believed that. I had no reason not to. But now, with everything happening, I felt like I needed to know more. I went to the old adoption agency building. It was still there, though things looked older, slower, a little faded. I sat across from a woman named Mrs. Daniels, an older Black African woman who had been working there for decades. She remembered my file, even remembered meeting my adoptive parents. She smiled when she spoke of them. "They were good people," she said softly. "You were lucky. And they were lucky too." I nodded, feeling something warm and hurt at the same time. When I asked about my biological father, though, her expression changed. Not surprised, not disapproving, just thoughtful. She told me my biological father wasn't just young and unprepared. He had been overwhelmed. He had grown up without support himself. He didn't know how to be a father. My biological mother, she said, had wanted to keep me, but things between her and my father had become unstable. They were both afraid. And when she left him, he made the decision to sign over parental rights. Listening to this, I realized I had grown up imagining abandonment as something sharp, something sudden, something careless. But maybe it had been messy and confusing and painful in ways I couldn't understand. It didn't excuse his choices now, but it changed the image I carried of him, a little less villain, a little more broken. When I left the agency, I felt heavier but clearer. I understood now that this wasn't just about greed. It was about regret. About a man who couldn't face the life he didn't live. And somehow, I was the last piece he thought he could reach for to fill that empty space. But I couldn't fill that space for him. And I couldn't let him take from the life my adoptive parents built. Just when I started to feel certain about my decision, something unexpected happened. My biological father requested a meeting. Not through lawyers. Not through letters. He wanted to talk in person. I didn't know what I would say. I didn't know what I would feel. But I agreed. The meeting was set for the following week. And as the day approached, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever happened in that conversation would change everything. I didn't sleep much the night before the meeting. My mind kept circling back to the same questions, looping endlessly. What would I say? What would he say? Would I feel anger when I saw him, or would I feel nothing at all? I had spent a lifetime imagining a version of him that didn't exist anymore, maybe never existed. Now I was going to sit across from the real man, flawed, human, and tangled in motives I didn't fully understand. The meeting place was a small cafe in the older part of town, the kind where the chairs are mismatched and the menu is handwritten on a chalkboard. It was quiet, almost too quiet, with the soft sound of cups clinking and light conversation humming in the background. I arrived early and took a seat near the window. My hands felt cold even though the room wasn't cold at all. I kept rubbing them together slowly, trying to calm myself. I watched people walk by outside the window, couples holding hands, kids dragging school bags, old men laughing while sipping tea. Life kept moving like nothing was happening. But inside me, everything felt like it was on pause. Then he arrived. I recognized him before he even stepped inside. The posture, the way he walked, the slight tilt of his head. It was strange how someone could be so familiar and so foreign at the same time. He hesitated at the door, looking around until his eyes landed on me. He gave a small nod, almost unsure, and walked over. When he sat down, neither of us spoke for several seconds. We just stared, almost studying each other. He looked older than I expected. Lines around his eyes, a bit of gray in his hair. He had lived a life without me in it, yet he was here now, acting like he still had a place. "Thank you for coming," he said finally. His voice didn't sound like anything I remembered. But how could it? I didn't remember him at all. I had only imagined. "Why did you want to meet?" I asked. My voice surprised me. It was calm, steady. He sighed, leaning back a little. I thought, maybe we could talk. Maybe I could explain. Explain. That word felt heavy, almost insulting. Explain what? Abandoning a child? Disappearing? Reappearing only when money became part of the equation? But I stayed quiet. He continued, looking down at his hands. I was young. I made mistakes. I didn't know how to raise a child. I wasn't ready. I thought someone else could give you a better life than I could. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't trust myself to speak. He looked up and something in his eyes shifted. And they did. You turned into someone successful. Someone stable. Someone I'm proud of. That word hit harder than I expected. Proud. But my heart stayed guarded. Then he added, I just want to be part of your life again. Not because of the trust fund. I swear. I raised my eyes slowly and held his stare. He didn't look away. That moment was complicated. Part of me wanted to believe him. To believe there was still some kind of connection between us, invisible but real. Another part of me felt like every sentence he spoke bent under the weight of money, like truth couldn't stand straight anymore. He continued talking, telling me about his life. Jobs he lost, places he moved, people he tried to trust but failed. He sounded like a man who had spent years walking without direction. A man who regretted but didn't know how to fix anything. I tried to understand him, but the more he talked, the more I felt something tightening inside me. He wanted something. Whether he was admitting it or not. And he knew I knew. When we finally stood to leave, he reached for a hug. It was instinct for him, hesitation for me. After a few seconds, I let him, but it felt like hugging a stranger with a familiar face. A face that belonged to the story I should have had but never got. Outside the cafe, we parted ways with polite words, like two acquaintances rather than father and child. I watched him walk down the street, shrinking with each step until he disappeared into the crowd. But the story didn't settle there. It only grew heavier. Because later that night, I received a message from my adoptive mother. She didn't ask questions. She didn't panic. She simply wrote, I'm here if you need to talk. And that was when I realized something important. My real parent was the one who stayed. The one who raised me. The one who showed up again and again even when life wasn't easy. But the conflict wasn't over. Because my biological father didn't walk away after that meeting. He started reaching out more. Calling. Texting. And then, without warning, a lawyer's letter arrived at my door. A legal request. He didn't ask for a relationship. He asked for rights. Rights to claim a portion of something he never built, never nurtured, never protected. The $3 million trust fund. The very thing he swore wasn't the reason he came back. My chest went hollow reading those papers. The man who said he was proud of me. The man who talked about mistakes. The man who claimed he wanted to reconnect. He was now trying to take something from me that wasn't just money, it was a symbol of my adoptive parents' love, sacrifice, and belief in me. The conflict that once felt emotional had now become legal. Public. Raw. And I knew this wasn't just about money. This was about identity. Belonging. Loyalty. Bang. This was about who gets to claim you, and who actually earned that right. And the hardest part? I hadn't even decided how I truly felt about him yet. But now the choice wasn't emotional anymore. It was war. And I wasn't sure which part of me would survive it. To be continued? I kept the letter on my desk for almost an hour before I could even bring myself to touch it again. It felt like the longer it stayed unopened, the longer I could pretend nothing was happening. But of course life doesn't pause just because we want it to. So I finally picked it up and read it again, slowly, this time word by word. And the more I read it, the more real everything became. He was actually trying to take me to court. He was actually claiming he had parental rights, because he was my biological father, even though he had walked away before I could even say my first words. He claimed he deserved a share of the trust fund because blood relations entitled him to it. My hands shook, but not from fear. It was something deeper. Something sharper. Something I wasn't sure I had ever felt before. My adoptive mom sat across from me at the dining table. She didn't speak right away. She just waited, letting me process it. She had always been like that, patient, steady, calm even when things didn't feel calm at all. Finally she asked, "How do you feel?" I didn't even know. I stared at the papers like they were written in a language I didn't understand. "I feel like he's trying to rewrite my entire life," I said quietly. "Like he thinks just showing up gives him the right to everything." My mom nodded. She didn't try to fix my feelings. She didn't say it would be okay. She knew this was one of those things I had to walk through myself. But she was there. Just like she always had been. We ended up talking to a lawyer the next day. A woman with sharp eyes and a voice that didn't shake. She explained everything clearly, carefully, almost like she knew my heart was somewhere between anger and disbelief. "He has no legal claim unless he can prove he financially supported you or was involved in your upbringing," she explained. "Which, from what you've told me, he wasn't. So we'll win?" I asked, trying not to let too much hope show. Her expression softened. "Law is rarely that simple. He may try to argue emotional intent. That he wanted to be involved." Wanted. That word again. The same word he used in the cafe. The same word that made something in me hope for a moment, only to be broken minutes later. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back in the dark, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything. The trust fund wasn't just money, it represented love, protection, and everything my adoptive parents had poured into my life. Losing any part of it felt like letting him rewrite history. And worst of all, part of me still wanted to understand him. Still wanted something to make sense. But every call he made after that meeting felt different. Before, his voice was warm, hesitant, apologetic. After the legal claim was filed, his calls became rushed, defensive, almost desperate. He said things like, "I never stopped thinking about you. I did what I thought was best. You owe me a chance to make things right. You owe me." That was the moment everything shifted. Because love doesn't start with "you owe me." My adoptive mom noticed how quiet I'd become. She sat with me one night while I stared out the window, watching the city glow under streetlights. "You don't have to be strong alone," she said. "Whatever happens, we'll handle it together." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pain, something like gratitude and sadness tangled together. But just because we were together didn't mean the situation got easier. The court date was set. My biological father showed up with a lawyer who looked confident. Too confident. He sat across the room from me, and for a moment I saw something in his expression, fear. Or maybe regret. Or maybe he realized this was no longer just about money. This was about identity. About who I belonged to. About who chose me. I kept waiting for him to say something. To apologize. To back down. To show he understood the gravity of what he was doing. But instead he avoided my eyes. As the hearing progressed, both lawyers presented arguments. Dates, documents, statements. My adoptive mom spoke about raising me. Her voice shook only once when she said, "I loved her before I ever saw her." My biological father spoke too. He talked about mistakes, about hardship, about wanting a second chance. His words were polished, prepared. But something felt missing, something that couldn't be practiced. Truth. The tension in the room felt like it was building by the second. Every sentence spoken was another knot tying itself in my chest. And it became painfully clear that no matter how this ended, something would break. either my past or my present. And just when I thought the situation couldn't get heavier, the judge asked me to speak. The entire room went quiet. Both of them looked at me. The man who raised me. The man who left me. My heart beat so loudly I could hear it echoing in my ears. My throat felt tight. My hands felt cold again. I stood, every step toward the front feeling impossibly slow. Everyone was waiting for my words. But I hadn't realized something until that exact moment. This wasn't just about who legally had a right to anything. This was about who I was going to choose. Who I was going to be. The air felt thick, heavy, expectant. I opened my mouth. And that was where the real climax began. I took a slow breath, my hands trembling just enough that I needed to fold them in front of me to steady myself. The courtroom felt too quiet, like everyone in it was holding the same breath I was. I didn't look at either of them at first. I just stared at the judge, at the wooden grain of the podium, at the floor, anywhere but their faces. And then I began to speak. I told the truth. Not the dramatic version. Not the emotional explosion I once imagined. Just the simple truth of my life. How I grew up loved. How my adoptive parents taught me how to ride a bike and how to speak kindly and how to believe in myself. How every birthday, every school event, every late-night heartbreak, they were there. And how he wasn't. Not once. Not even in the background. I didn't accuse him. I didn't blame him. I just explained what was real. When I finished, I finally forced myself to look at him. And that was when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. His lawyer was whispering urgently to him, but my biological father wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on the floor. His shoulders were slumped. He didn't look confident anymore. He looked like someone who was losing something he didn't know how to hold. The judge called for a short recess. Everyone stood, the tension still thick in the air. I walked out into the hallway to breathe. That's when my father followed me, not aggressively, just quietly, like someone who needed to say something before everything was decided. He started to speak, but the words didn't come out clearly. He looked frustrated, overwhelmed, maybe even ashamed. For a moment, I thought maybe this was going to be the turning point. Maybe he would finally tell me the reason. But instead, something else happened. A woman approached us. I didn't recognize her. She was older, maybe in her late 40s or early 50s, with tired eyes and a posture that suggested she had seen more life than she ever asked for. She stopped beside him, placing a hand on his arm gently, like someone who was familiar with comforting him. I assumed she was his wife. But I was wrong. She looked at me with a softness I didn't understand. And then she said, "I'm your aunt." The hallway felt like it tilted just slightly. I blinked. What? Twice. Trying to process her words. She continued, "I've known about you your entire life." My father closed his eyes, like he had been hoping this moment wouldn't happen. I asked, "Why didn't you come forward? Why now? Why anything?" Her expression tightened, not cold, not angry, just heavy. "Because your grandparents didn't want your father to keep you. They said he'd ruin his future. They forced him to give you up. They made him sign the papers. He was young, scared, and they were strict. Harsh even. He didn't walk away by choice. He was pushed out of your life." The silence after her words was louder than any shout could have been. My father still wouldn't look at me. His jaw was clenched tight, like he was holding back something he didn't know how to release. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know what to believe. For years I had imagined a simple story. He left. He didn't want me. End of explanation. Now there was another possibility. Maybe he didn't leave. Maybe he was forced out. The hallway felt smaller, too small for the weight of everything pressing into it. My aunt stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He should have come to find you sooner. I told him to. But he was ashamed. He thought you would hate him. And when he found out about the trust fund, he panicked. He didn't know how to approach you without looking like he just wanted money. So he handled everything wrong. Very wrong." My father finally spoke then. His voice was rough and unsteady. "I didn't want to lose you twice." The irony of that sentence cut deep. Because choosing this legal battle was exactly how he was losing me. Before either of us could say anything else, my adoptive mom walked up. She had clearly heard enough to understand what was happening. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look angry. She simply stood beside me, steady and protective, like she had always been. The four of us stood there, suspended between the past and the present. And that was when the second twist hit. My aunt looked at my adoptive mother, then at me and said quietly, "There's something else you need to know. The trust fund, it didn't come from your adoptive parents alone. Your biological mother contributed to it. It was set up under both of their names." My breath caught. My adoptive mother's eyes went wide. She clearly didn't know either. The trust fund wasn't just a gift from my adoptive parents. It was the last thing my biological mother ever did for me before disappearing from both of our lives. Which meant, this fight was not just about what my father wanted. It was about what she intended. And now, the truth about her was tangled in the balance, waiting to be uncovered. The hallway silence returned, heavier than before. The court officer called us back in. But this time, I didn't just walk in as someone defending what I had. I walked in as someone who suddenly had more questions than answers. Someone who realized this story wasn't just about abandonment or money. It was about history. About choices. About secrets that had been buried too long. And I knew. The real climax was still ahead. When we walked back into the courtroom, everything felt different. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was deciding. Every step I took felt slow, steady, almost like I finally understood the weight of my own story. My aunt sat quietly behind my father now, her hands folded, her eyes heavy with truths that had been kept locked away too long. My adoptive mom stood beside me, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel her presence like a steady heartbeat. The judge asked if I wanted to say anything before the final statements. I nodded. This time I didn't hesitate. I grew up knowing who loved me, I said, my voice steadier than before. I grew up knowing who protected me, who showed up, who stayed. My adoptive mother didn't give me her blood, but she gave me her entire life. She gave me every piece of herself willingly. I took a breath and turned toward my biological father. He lifted his eyes, but they were full of something raw now. Not pride. Not confidence. Just vulnerability. I understand now that you made mistakes, I continued. And maybe you were forced. Maybe life didn't give you a fair chance back then. But you had years to try. Years to find me. Years to write a letter. Years to try again. And you chose silence. A quiet ripple moved through the courtroom, soft sighs, shifting seats. I am not here to punish you, I said. I don't hate you. But the trust fund, that is part of my life with my adoptive family. It is part of the life they built to give me a future. And I can't let that be taken away to fix the past. The judge listened closely, expression unreadable. My biological father swallowed hard, his hands clasped so tightly that his knuckles turned white. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was firm. Based on testimony and evidence, the petition for asset claim is denied. The trust fund remains under the custody and ownership of the respondent. Relief washed over me, but it did not feel triumphant. It felt like exhaling a weight I had been holding for years. My father didn't argue. He didn't shout. He didn't look angry. He just deflated. As if the fight had been the only thing holding him upright. The court emptied slowly. My adoptive mom hugged me and I could feel tears finally breaking free, hers and mine. For a short moment I thought that was the end of everything. The final page. But then my aunt walked toward us. Her face was soft, almost apologetic. There's one more thing you deserve to know, she said quietly. I felt my body tense again, but I nodded. Your biological mother didn't disappear because she wanted to, she said. She passed away when you were 3 months old. She left that trust fund as her final decision for you. She wanted you to have a life better than hers, no matter who raised you. The room around me blurred for a moment, not because I was shocked but because the grief hit in a strange, distant way. Like mourning someone I never met, yet somehow always carried inside me. And your father, she continued, glancing back at him, never recovered from that loss. He tried to move forward, but he didn't know how. The only thing he knew was running from pain. My breath shook. My adoptive mom placed a gentle hand on my back, grounding me. My father finally spoke, voice breaking slightly. I didn't come back because of the money. I came back because I heard you were turning 21. I wanted to at least try, before it was too late. I just didn't know how to talk to you without ruining everything. Maybe he meant it. Maybe part of him always meant it. Life is rarely one clean truth. It's usually layers of good intentions, fear, mistakes, and silence. I didn't forgive him completely. Not instantly. Some wounds need time to loosen before they can heal. But I walked over to him. And I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just said the most honest thing I could find inside myself. You don't get to rewrite the past. But maybe we don't have to repeat it either. His eyes filled with tears that he didn't wipe away. We didn't hug. We didn't break down dramatically. We just stood near each other, two people who had finally stopped running. Weeks later, after the dust settled, something unexpected happened. A letter came in the mail, no lawyers, no demands, no legal language. Just a simple envelope. Inside was a copy of a photograph. A young woman holding a tiny baby, smiling softly, tired but full of love. My biological mother. On the back of the photo were 4 words in ink that had faded slightly with time. For my daughter's future. I placed the photo in a frame on my bedside table. Not because I needed to replace anything, but because my story was never about choosing one family over another. It was about understanding that love can come from more than one place, even if it gets lost, tangled, or delayed. Some chapters close broken. Some reopen years later. And some we carry quietly, learning how to hold them gently. This was mine. When the courtroom doors closed behind us and everyone drifted away, I thought the story had finally reached its ending. I thought that the hardest part was over. I had protected the trust fund, I had spoken my truth, and I had learned pieces of my history that had been buried almost my entire life. It felt like the kind of moment where the credits should start rolling. But real life doesn't fade out so neatly. About a week later, I received a call from my aunt. Her voice sounded different this time, not urgent, not sad, just steady. She asked if we could meet. I agreed, thinking maybe she wanted closure or to apologize for the pressure everything had put on me. We met at a small public park, one with bright green grass and families playing nearby. It was the kind of place where life continues, no matter what anyone is going through. She sat on a bench under a tree, holding a thin folder in her lap. When I sat down, she took a slow breath before handing it to me. "I didn't want to give this to you before because I didn't think you were ready," she said. "But you deserve to know everything. The full truth. Not just pieces." I opened the folder carefully. Inside were letters, handwritten, shaky, emotional. Some were torn. Some were stained with what I could only guess were tears. They were from my biological mother. Letters she had written to me before she passed, planning to give them to me when I was older. Letters that were never delivered. I felt something tighten deeply in my chest as I read the first line. "My sweet baby, I hope one day you will read this and know how much you were loved before you could even understand love." My aunt explained in a quiet voice, "Your mother didn't want to give you up. She fought so hard to keep you. She begged our parents to let her raise you alone. But she was very sick. She knew she didn't have long. She asked me to make sure your father would raise you with love. But he was already falling apart. He didn't know how to be a father without her." I looked up slowly. My aunt's eyes were glassy, holding back years of silence. "These letters," she continued, "were meant to be your connection to her. But when she died, everything collapsed. Your father shut down. He gave in to our parents' pressure. He believed you would have a better life somewhere else. And you did. But the price was losing the truth of how much you were wanted." I held the letters close, like something fragile that might break if I breathed too hard. It was the twist I didn't expect. Not anger. Not betrayal. But love. My biological mother did love me. She didn't abandon me. She didn't leave me behind. She spent her final days trying to keep me, writing to me, loving me in every way she could, even knowing I might not remember her face or voice. And my father, he wasn't just weak. He was grieving. Lost. Broken by love he didn't know how to hold after she was gone. When I went home that evening, I sat at my bedside with the letters spread out. My adoptive mom walked in and sat beside me without asking anything. She quietly listened as I told her everything. I expected her to feel threatened or hurt. But she just placed her hand gently over mine and said, "There's room in your heart for all of it. You don't lose me because you learn more about her." And I cried. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind that comes from something finally fitting back into place. Later I reached out to my father. Not to reopen old wounds. Not to give him the trust fund. Not to erase the past. But to give us both a chance to move forward, without lies, without anger, without the heavy silence that had followed us for so long. We met at the same cafe where we first faced the truth. This time neither of us looked away. He didn't speak first. I did. "I read her letters," I said softly. His eyes closed, like hearing that brought something long buried back to the surface. "She loved you more than anything," he whispered. I didn't know how to love you without her." There was pain in his voice, yes, but also something else. Hope. We didn't fix everything that day. Some relationships don't snap together instantly after being broken for years. But we started. Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. They say every story has to choose between happy ending or heartbreak. But sometimes the real ending is somewhere in between, where healing lives. I didn't lose my adoptive mom. I didn't lose the trust fund. I didn't lose my identity. I gained the truth. And it changed everything. Not by replacing what I had, but by adding the missing piece I didn't know I needed. A beginning hidden inside an ending.